Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Bell Cows podcast. Week 4 is in the books, and we are officially 25% done with the season. Well, not quite actually. We have an extra regular season week this year, but we've got to see some glimpses of a lot of players, and now this is starting to become the year where time of year where we almost know what to expect with some of these players, but there are definitely a lot of guys that can turn the table and start turning around, or the opposite. We know guys like DeAndre Hopkins haven't really been doing a lot until this last week he started putting up points. So it's an interesting time of the year. But anyways, it's Evan and I, and we are here with another podcast episode. Evan, do you want to say a little hello for our viewers?
Yeah, welcome back, Bell Cows. So another week in the books, and my Lions are officially 0-5. The ending of this game was once again another heart puncher. Dan Campbell was so distraught after the win that he actually cried at his press conference. So it's nice to know he cares, but it's only week 6 now, so I'm a little concerned that the losses are getting to him. Like, it's all right, Dan. Like, you went 0-16.
It's the Lions.
Yeah, it's the Lions. Like, let's lower those expectations a little bit. And you've already gone 0-16, so it can't get any worse than that. So just hang on, buddy, and buckle up your chin strap, because it's going to be a bumpy ride, but we're going to come out of this on top eventually. And we got lots of draft picks. So just take it easy, and don't let the losses get you down emotionally too much.
That's a great point. It's the Lions, and although they've been so close every single week, it's like the same story. They had Justin Tucker kick an unbelievable 66-yard field goal, but this week it was almost more impressive because it was a Vikings kicker who had literally missed, like, I think it was a game time or game winning, like 30-yard field goal a couple weeks ago, and now they come in and they kick a 50-something yarder as time expires to win the game. It was almost more heartbreaking. So it's a tough time to be a Lions fan. But on the positive side, your guys' losses have been so close and against actually good teams like the Vikings and the Ravens, where I think that the Lions, they have a shot to end up pulling out like 4 or 5 games if they get a good stretch together or their schedule is a little bit more favorable.
Yeah, so I'm going to the Cincinnati Bengals game this weekend, and I'm really thrilled. I'm thrilled not for a Lions victory, but I'm thrilled to see Smoking Joe Burrow slinging the rock out there to rookie Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. T. Higgins is back. Joe Mixon. So I'm starting Joe Mixon. You can bet I'm starting Tyler Boyd in my lineups. So I'm excited. I'm not going to be wearing my Chad Johnson jersey there just out of respect to my team, but I'm not expecting us to cover 3.5 points. It's going to be another loss for us, I'm expecting. But hey, I mean, the problem is we lost Quintez Cephas for the season now. Frank Ragnow, our Pro Bowl center, is out for the season. So I can see why Campbell's crying, because he's just, every single time he turns around, another player's going down for the season. And so it's going to be tough. I mean, the number one receiver on Sunday is going to be Khalif Raymond, and then TJ Hawkinson, who has been, someone should tell him to wake up from his nap, because he's been sleeping on Sundays the last 3 weeks. So I'm not sure what's been going on there, but he's got to get his crap together.
TJ Hawkinson is making me look so bad, because there's literally been multiple times on this podcast where I've gone out and said that TJ Hawkinson is an amazing player. And I've gone out on a limb for this guy, and this guy is not returning the favor at all. Come on, man. That's super exciting that you're going to get to see that game. I know you were talking pre-show about some of the jerseys you have, a lot of diva wide receivers. Maybe pull out that Calvin Johnson jersey for the game. And hey, you forgot to mention Amara St. Brown. 2 big weeks for him. I want to see him get a touchdown against the Bengals.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, he has been being used more in the passing game. You can't really call it much of a passing game when Jared Goff can't put up 5 fantasy points, but he is getting some of those targets. So St. Brown is definitely a life preserver flex in your lineup this week. The Bengals have a pretty good defense. So I'm a little concerned if you're having to start him, but if you have to, he might get a few targets.
The Bengals almost beat the Packers this past week. That game went into overtime because, spoiler alert, the kicker, Mason Crosby, missed a few field goals. As consistent as he is, all of the kickers were seemingly missing field goals, except for that Vikings kicker. But anyways, that's my last little dig at the Lions.
Well, the funniest thing was Evan McPherson must have been hanging out with some Lions fans because some tradition that we have is that we like to celebrate before the game is won. And as soon as Evan McPherson, he kicks the ball and he hits the flag, I don't think he realized that the ball has to go through the uprights. So he started jumping around into his teammates' arms celebrating, and hey buddy, you actually missed the field goal there. So don't hang out with us as much, buddy. You're gonna want to hang out with some winners so that are gonna put the ball through the uprights, and make sure you win the game before you start celebrating.
That's for sure. As a Jets fan, I feel you there. It feels like we have the game in the bag sometimes and it doesn't turn out. The Falcons, they felt like they had the game in the bags against us. I know it was another big lead that they almost blew. I was hoping it would be another case of the collapse of the Falcons. Now with a new coach, but it doesn't matter because Matt Ryan's still there. They were up 17-0, and then they ended up winning by touchdown, but we got it down all the way to 3 points. So it was another tough loss for the Jets as well, coming off of that victory. Something funny about that, and then we'll move into some other topics. Get off the subject of the stinking Lions and the Jets. But an interesting thing was on NFL Live, all four of the analysts picked the Jets to beat the Falcons, despite the Jets being underdogs. So
Wow.
I feel like I think I got 14 out of the 16 games right in Pick'em this week. So I was pretty happy.
Jeez.
But
Wow.
I actually picked the Jets to win. So it shows you that even if you're a Jets fan, no matter how well you think you know them, they're always going to prove you wrong. I thought we were going to lose to the Titans. I thought for sure we were going to beat the Falcons. Neither of those things happened. But anyways, that's
Did you pick the Bears or the Raiders?
Who'd I pick? Oh, the Raiders was the other one I got wrong. All right. Anyways, Evan, are you there?
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I think my internet connection might have been a little bit unstable there. It happens though.
Yeah, you were frozen in time.
It's frozen in time. All right. So did you hear when I said that I picked the Raiders to win as well? That was the other one I got wrong.
Oh, yeah, okay. I was figuring that was probably your other loss.
I picked the Bills to win. So
oh
that's a
wow.
plus.
Okay.
And
Bills
I picked the Eagles to win it. I picked the Eagles to win as well.
Really? You went against your boy?
I was feeling good about myself after those two games, despite the little stumble with the Jets.
Yeah, that's gutsy for sure. I was not expecting the Chiefs to drop I mean, I respect the Bills, but I just wasn't expecting them to come out and lose for a third time. Just, because I mean, I didn't anticipate their defense to be that bad, I guess, which is my fault. But yeah, they haven't looked good, and at this point, they really got to start getting their stuff together. It looks like Mahomes, he just can't really play well against the two deep safeties, which is what the Bucks did in the Super Bowl, but that's what the Bills did, and he's not patient enough to methodically move his team down the field, on those long 10 plus play drives, and that's what's been hurting them so far. And then of course you have bad news for CEH owners with him being out for, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a season-ending injury, but he's going to be out for 4 weeks or so. So Darrell Williams, if he's on your waiver wire, you're going to want to pick him up if you can.
There were some big time injuries this week. I was feeling bad because in my redraft league that I'm doing, there was a game that was neck and neck. It was like the two highest two of the top three highest scores of the week. And it came, and one of the teams hadn't got a win all season. So it was
Oh,
really
wow.
pulling for this team because they were having an amazing week. Had Tom Brady, had Mike Evans. Seemed like things were going well for them. They even had Gaskin on their team, but unfortunately, this is the first week all season when they happened to bench Miles Gaskin. And that was a rough one. You never know what to expect.
Yeah.
But they had Sammy Watkins and they needed 12 points for him in PPR. And of course, he has to get injured. The only Ravens player, basically, who didn't actually have a great week.
Yeah, well, Tyson Williams didn't do anything either. I don't think Latavius Murray. I think the running backs were pretty much a non-factor because Lamar Jackson was busy throwing up 442 yards and 4 touchdowns and 60 yards on the ground. So he took the ball in his hands and he said, my name's Superman, get on my shoulders and I'm going to carry you to a win.
That was crazy. Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, and Marquise Brown, they all got it done. But I want to head into a little bit of a rant about this game. So I was up by, I think, 70 or 80 points. And I was going up against, in a super flex league, Lamar Jackson, Marquise Brown, and Mark Andrews. So I had a 99% chance of winning. And I end up losing by 40 points after winning with like 3 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. So that was crazy. And then another league that I was in, I thought for sure I was going to lose this league. This league, I was actually undefeated. And I'm like, oh, this is where it snaps. I had Jonathan Taylor, who got just enough for me to squeak out a victory. So I won one, but I lost one. Unfortunately, the one I lost was in our listener league. Big shout out to Lil Denny in the listener league. That is Kyle's brother. I said I would give him a shout out. Not only did he beat me, but his Ravens got a big time victory as well against our other co-host Kyle's Colts. So it was really rubbing in the ruin for Kyle there.
Yeah, that was a really thrilling game. I wish the Ravens played on national television every week because I've been watching them on Monday Night Football, and they've just been so much fun to watch. It seems like the games are so close and really good for fantasy too. But yeah, Jackson, he scored over 20 points. He scored over 20
44.
points. Yeah, 44. But he scored over 20 points every week except week 1, I believe. So he's been very reliable. He's the third quarterback overall in fantasy. So he's just been on fire. I was in a similar situation as you where I had Lamar Jackson left to play and my opponent had Mo Alley Cox. I was down by 40 points, but unfortunately, Jackson, he needed to score 50 points for me to tie, 51 to win. And Mo Alley Cox, it's a tight end premium league, so he had 11, and I ended up losing by 2. So there's a little bit of a bummer there. And then one of my opponents had Hollywood Brown and Lamar Jackson, and I was up by 40, and I was like, I got a chance to win. And then, obviously that didn't happen. So a little bit of a rough week for me. Yeah, a little bit of a rough week for me. Not fun regarding my fantasy teams, but I did make a huge monster deal this week that I'm not sure if you're going to agree with it or not, but it involved me trading 3 first-round picks and Tyler Lockett.
Oh, okay. I'm interested to hear it then. You're paying premium for whoever you're playing.
Yeah. So just what's a name that comes to mind that you think I might have traded for?
I feel like
that kind of capital.
I feel like you're a big Justin Jefferson fan. So if you're going for a receiver, it might be Justin Jefferson. If you're going for a running back, I don't even. That's hard to say. Who would I give 3 firsts for? Honestly, I would almost consider giving 3 firsts for Najee Harris at this point in the season. But yeah, it's hard to guess.
So he's not the only guy got in the deal, but Alvin Kamara is the person that I gave.
I was actually I almost guessed him.
Yeah. So Alvin Kamara, the reason why I did this deal is because I'm competing. I'm 3-2. I'm in the top 4 right now. And basically I have James Robinson and DeAndre Swift both slotted in my running backs each week, but I have strong receivers as well, but my flexes are just a little bit too light for me to really compete for a championship. So I acquired 3 first round picks through various deals. And I made the decision that I wanted to really go for it this year. And I also needed a little bit of wide receiver depth. So I traded for Emmanuel Sanders, who's been top 17 in the league this season. It's a 1-year rental. Yeah, I know. And I also acquired Julio Jones, which, he's been injured, but he still has that potential to come in and help me later in the season. And then Alvin Kamara obviously was the big name that I got. So yeah, so I mean it's a big move, three first round picks, but they were going to be late first round picks. The
Okay.
two other picks I had were 2 of the other guys that are competing for the championship this season, and then mine's going to be a late pick as well. So yeah, I made a big move there to try and put myself in position to win and get into the playoffs and hopefully win the championship. We'll see.
I'll say this: it's better than the trade that I made for Alvin Kamara. I think it was a few months ago before the season started, where I was like, you know what? I want to see if I can put together a good team. My team's young. I don't really feel like waiting for next season when I have like 4 first round picks. So, in all fairness, it was a mistake on my part, and so don't follow my advice. Be impatient and try to blow it blow it all up. But luckily, I still have a lot of draft capital. But I traded like 4 first round picks for Alvin Kamara, Chuba Hubbard, Ramondre Stevenson, and Ty Johnson. And I was extremely high on Chuba Hubbard. I was pretty high on Alvin Kamara, and I was high on the other guys as well. But I do think it was a mistake. Actually, it might have not have been Ramondre Stevenson. I think it
I
was
don't
Ronald
know.
Jones. So that even more of a
Oh,
mistake. I
okay.
traded for Ramondre Stevenson. I think I got him for a 2022 second. So I tried to blow it all up because running backs are worth their weight in gold, and I expect that it's maybe similar in that league, or though it sounds like maybe an 18 league. This one's a 14-team league, so running backs worth a lot. But back to your trade. So I'm in a similar boat. I I'm not sure if I like it, but I definitely
Yeah.
wouldn't say that you're walking away as a clear winner like some trades. I think we're gonna have to see a little bit more just to kind of see how that one works out. I like that you're going for it. I think that Julio Jones actually might have another 2-3 years left in him. If he can get in the end zone, that would be valuable, but he hasn't necessarily been doing great this season. Emmanuel Sanders, you can probably tell I'm not a big Emmanuel Sanders fan. I feel like it's almost dependent on the offense and the game script each week to week. So if the Bills start playing teams not like the Chiefs, and Chiefs defense is atrocious, if they start playing like some either tough defenses, or teams that they're just going to blow out, then there could be a good chance that it's Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs, and the second half is all Zach Moss and Devil Singletary. So I'm not as big on him, but I respect the move. That was a gutsy move, and we'll have to see if it pays off for you.
Yeah, I mean, Kamara's 26 years old. He's the guy there in New Orleans. I don't see that changing. So I was a little concerned just with how Winston's been so inconsistent. But after this week against Washington, it's clear that Kamara's still going to get his receptions and his carries. So I like that. He's kind of a poor man's Christian McCaffrey. And then Sanders has really been the number 2 guy
Yeah,
there outside of Dawson Knox and Stephon Diggs. Beasley
Dawson
has,
Knox.
yeah, Knox. So yeah, I mean, I was willing to take the risk. I didn't love having to give up the 3 firsts. I really wanted to just give up a second. I knew I was overpaying a little bit, but if you're trying to make a move to win a championship, you kind of have to, take that into account that you're going to have to overpay a little sometimes. So I was willing to make that move, and then we'll see if it pays off. But another aspect of that too is Kamara, even if I don't win the championship, he still carries a lot of capital with him. So if I want to move him later
Uh-huh.
on, there's a chance I can get some of those first round picks back.
I think there could be a really interesting discussion to be had about it. So I just want to clarify, is it an 8-team league?
No, it's all my leagues are 12 teams.
Oh, so you're top four in your 3-2. Okay, 12 team. So
Yeah.
I would definitely pay attention to the size of your leagues. I'm just speaking in general here because, like that one instance where I probably overpaid and I kind of regret it right now, even though my team is doing better. But it was a 14-team league, so you definitely are going to
Yeah.
pay a little bit premium for the running back position in general. And then if it's an 8-team league, it's like, well, Emmanuel Sanders and Julio Jones, they're not necessarily going to help you a lot. And whereas you have a 12-team league, I think that makes a little bit more sense. When I initially heard you were top four and 3-2, I was wondering to myself, is it how small of a league is it? But I think it makes a little bit more sense in 12-team league. Still might have been a slight overpay depending on where those picks land, just because I
Yeah.
do tend to have a bias towards youth. But I think that again, I mean, it's too early to tell.
Yeah, I mean they're gonna be late first round picks, so I just don't expect to find an Alvin Kamara. I mean, of course, when Kamara was
If they
taken,
do end up late, then yeah, you're gonna win. So
yeah, so we'll see what happens. I was able to find Kadarius Toney as a late second round pick in my rookie draft this season, and it looks like that pick is potentially going to hit. So I mean, there's still some diamonds in the rough that you can pick up in the second rounds, the third rounds of rookie draft if you get lucky. But you try to evaluate the talent, and then you really gotta look at injuries, injury updates, and look at the opportunities they have in an offense. Because if Shepard and Galladay and Darius Slayton don't go down, Kadarius Toney's is still riding the bench. So sometimes opportunities arise out of situations where they're not expected.
I'll make the case against it then. So you said Kadarius Toney, you got him a league second round pick. I think
Yeah.
it goes to show how much value these rookie picks can end up having. Again, they have to hit. And I know if you got a guy like Trey Sermon or Michael Carter, right now it's not looking super pretty. But if you get that first round pick and you get a guy like Terry McLaurin, a few years later, this guy's worth multiple first round picks. There's a high percent chance that potentially could hit. I feel like Jamar Chase, his value is going up. Kyle Pitts, his value is going up. So, but when you look at like that back end of the first round, because I do think the top tier running backs tend to go in those first picks. So the running backs especially are worth more. If you're going with like a hit or miss type receiver, like a Rondell Moore, Rashad Bateman, that's where I think you really get your value in that trade. But then again, if one of those do end up sneaking up being an early one, you get like a guy like Javonte Williams. All of a sudden, Javonte Williams, if he gets going, and Alvin Kamara in his age, those two are going to be looking a lot more similar than we think. So it really depends on where those picks land. But I think it's an interesting debate to be had, and I know that's something that we like to spend a lot of time with this being a dynasty podcast. But anyways, let's move on to something different now. We have a segment for today called Dynasty Movers and Losers, trying to provide you guys with a little bit more consistency. We're going with movers and losers. We're going with champs and chumps. We're doing the FanDuel thing. So we hope you guys enjoy it. But let's move on to Dynasty's movers and losers. I'll just let you start with whoever you want here, and we'll go with that position first.
So I have three quarterbacks that we have given praise to throughout the season, and they each scored under 10 points this week. Taylor Heineke, Sam Darnold, and David Carr. No, Derek Carr, his younger brother with the big biceps. But so these are three quarterbacks that we've talked about throughout the season. Three guys that they've all been quarterback ones at certain points during the season. But this week they kind of showed I don't want to say their true colors, but some of that, sporadic play that we've seen in the past that kind of so Sam Darnold, he's thrown 5 interceptions the last 2 weeks. He was 21 for 37, 177 yards, Uh, couple 3 picks, 1 touchdown. So not a great day for him. He also didn't rush for any touchdowns, which was contributing to his fantasy production the last few weeks. Heineke was 20 for 41, 2 picks. And then Carr had 3 interceptions, no touchdowns. I'm sorry, Carr had 1 pick, and then he's had 3 interceptions the last 3 weeks. So these are 3 guys that their stock seems to be falling a little bit over the last couple weeks. And out of these 3 players, the one that I see bouncing back this week is going to be Taylor Heineke, because he's going up against Kansas City, which is a team that's going to just throw for millions and millions of yards against this Washington defense. And I see Heineke, he's that dual threat quarterback where he can rush. He saves himself in fantasy with his legs. So he's going to be able to rush a little bit. I see him. He might throw an interception, but he's going to be able to hit on some of these passes to Ricky Seals-Jones and Terry McLaurin. And we talked about how bad this Kansas City defense is. So he's somebody that if I was a betting man and I had to start one of these 3 players, I don't like Darnold against Minnesota. Minnesota was able to keep Goff below 5 points, like I said earlier. And their offense just hasn't been playing very well. The Minnesota Vikings are a team that they should have been able to really dominate this Lions defense, but they scored 17 points, and they just weren't really able to do much like we would expect. And then Derek Carr is going up against Denver, who has a stingy defense and some really quality defensive backs. And they're also dealing with a huge problem now with the loss of their leader, John Gruden, and coach. And I think that's really going to negatively affect Derek Carr, because Gruden and Carr, they've been linked at the hip for 4 or 5 seasons now. And Carr's been playing some of his best football. And without Gruden there to work with his pupil, I don't see Carr having a good week this Sunday. I think the team's going to unravel a little bit. So I would start Heineke out of this group.
I would normally disagree if it was any other week, but I feel like you make a really good case. Well, and you just brought up a major headline that happened yesterday, I believe, where John Gruden, he's out now, he resigns. Those guys were buzzed. I remember it was like when John Gruden had his quarterback camp for rookies, he like every year he'd take like the top batch of quarterbacks, like top first round picks, second round picks, and he'd have them go through like a little John Gruden boot camp, so to say. So I've watched a couple of those, and it was really interesting because when he came back to coach, he said that out of all those guys and all the guys that went through, like Patrick Mahomes went through, Sean Watson went through, that he was most impressed with Derek Carr. So I definitely feel like they had that chemistry going for them, and the Carr's trajectory was trending in the right direction. So I think that's going to hurt him, especially against the stingy Broncos defense when they couldn't even get it done against the Bears defense. And then Taylor Heineke, that guy, I think a lot of people like to say, well, he's just a backup. But this guy, he competed with Tom Brady at the highest level in the playoffs last season, balled out, and he has an easy matchup against the Chiefs, who, fun fact, they've allowed an average of 7.1 yards per play this season. So the greatest show on turf with Kurt Warner, they had Isaac Bruce, Terry Holt, Marshall Faulk. They only averaged 7.0 yards per play during their great season. So think of that. It's like every week, the greatest show on turf is going up against the Chiefs. That's basically what it feels like. So wow. I'm with you. If you're going up against the Chiefs, it's a very favorable matchup.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying invest your stock into Taylor Heineke. These are 3 guys that I said at the beginning of the year that I would sell Darnold when he was at his peak performance.
He's not.
Yeah, and he's not now, so you kind of have to hold him here, but this is a little concerning.
I want to bring something up, then. You said he's not in your peak performance. I remember when we were talking about Darnold a few weeks ago, where I said, you know what, maybe hold on to Darnold. That might seem like a mistake, but the reason I said that was because a lot of owners, before they're willing to pay that premium for a guy like Darnold, they want to see a few more weeks for obvious reasons. can't go off those first 3 weeks alone. But Darnold did not have Christian McCaffrey, and it's hard to argue that a player like any other player adds as much value to an offense and to a quarterback as Christian McCaffrey. So if he comes back this week, that's going to be big for Darnold. Darnold's starting to look
Yeah.
like the old Jets Darnold version, but with Christian McCaffrey, he can make almost any quarterback look good if you ask me. So
That's a
that would do
good
volumes for
point,
Darnold.
Justin. I forgot about McCaffrey coming back.
Yeah,
I would still start Heineke just because of how bad that Kansas City defense is, but
I agree.
Darnold would be the second guy that if you have to play him, I mean, you'd feel if McCaffrey's fully healthy, then you would feel pretty good about him being a safety blanket. So I'm sure he's gonna help a lot of those players. DJ Moore was somebody who had a bad week last week. His performance is going to go up again if Sam Darnold is able to throw the ball to Christian McCaffrey underneath and kind of open up those, farther passes for DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson.
Let me ask you this because I know you've been all about Kirk Cousins these last few weeks. This past week, you started him in your FanDuel lineup, and then the week before that, I think you said that he
Sit him.
was the. You said I thought you said start him, right?
So 2 weeks ago I said to sit him against the Browns.
Oh, okay.
Because the defense was gonna
Oh,
give
okay.
him a rough time. But this week I did pick him to be my FanDuel quarterback, or not FanDuel, DraftKings quarterback, because I have no faith in the Lions secondary, but those kneecap biters just put him right down and he wasn't able to perform. So I don't know. He looked pretty inaccurate. I'm a little concerned, but I'm not freaking out with Cousins. I mean, he still scored 15, which isn't good or great or anything, but yeah, he did okay. I think he'll bounce back. So I'm not freaking out about him yet.
Mm-hmm. He's another loser. But the question that I was going to get to with Kirk Cousins, actually, on a side note as well, is would you start Taylor Heineke over a guy like Kirk Cousins with this especially soft matchup?
Heineke or Darnold?
Heineke or Cousins?
Oh, that's tough. I would probably I would start Heineke just because I mean Kirk Cousins is solely gonna rely on his arm and he's going up a difficult secondary with Carolina. They've got a really good pass rush. So and he hasn't done anything the last 2 weeks. So I mean, Heineke at the very least, he should be able to score. I mean, the Chiefs are going to put up a lot of points, so he's going to have to keep up with them. He's going to have to throw the ball a lot with so that's going to mean that he's going to have more opportunities to score some touchdowns, and he runs the ball a lot as well with his legs, so he's a threat to score rushing touchdowns as well. So Heineke's kind of like that Jalen Hurts type of fantasy player that scores with his feet, isn't a very accurate passer, but he puts a lot of attempts up because he has to. So yeah, I mean, I would start Heineke over Cousins this week. It's painful to say just because I like Cousins so much better as a quarterback, but we're talking about fantasy here, and I gotta go with the matchup.
Hey, I mean, you were going pretty hot, like a hot take, trending in that direction. So I wanted to help you out there, help you really make a hot take there. And I would say that's a pretty hot take. I would say like if you had Cousins and Heineke and you had to start one or the other and your season was on the line, I feel like a lot of people would have to go with Cousins.
If it's the championship game, I'm starting Cousins because I can live with myself when I look in the mirror. I can look at myself in the mirror and say, hey, I started Cousins because he's a better quarterback. But for week 6, I'm starting Heineke because it's not a do or die situation. I'm going to take my swings on Heineke based on the matchup. And I mean, he has been a more productive quarterback up until last week. I mean, he's put up 30 plus points 3 weeks in a row before last week. So I mean, Heineke isn't a slouch. I just watched the game film and he looks pretty horrible just with missing open receivers and throwing stupid interceptions.
Yeah.
But maybe he'll realize he doesn't want to go back to the XFL, so he'll get his stuff together.
He couldn't even make the XFL. He didn't really get a shot, actually. I saw a video about that today. Where it's like
Really?
he got cut before he basically got a chance to make something happen or make something out of him in the XFL. You just went from like a habanero level of spice back down to like a jalapeno level of spice. I was hoping you'd say, that thing where it's like Max Kellerman, where it's like, if I have to have a 3-point shot made, do or die between Iguodala or Stephen Curry, I want Iguodala. I was hoping you'd say something like, I want Taylor Heineke. But I was looking at his. Yeah, I'll let you respond.
Yeah, I mean, I would, yes, I'm gonna say I'm gonna start Taylor Heineke this week, but I wouldn't. Actually, maybe I'll pick him as my fantasy Kings quarterback.
Okay, there we go.
That might be more of a habanero.
There we go. Okay.
All right, we'll
I
do
expect
that. Yeah, we'll do that because I wouldn't put the Super Bowl on the line with them, but I'll start him in DraftKings for sure.
Yeah, I guess you want to say the results of that now, or you want to wait till the next podcast when?
Well, I guess since we're on the topic, Justin and I, we've been doing the last few weeks, the second week of our head-to-head matchup, we participated in another DraftKings showdown, and the tweeters out there picked me actually to win this game. So thank you for your confidence. Unfortunately, it was once again misplaced as Justin beat me by 0.02. Yes, not 0.2, but 0.02 points. So we both had 113, and then he had 0.62 and I had 0.60. So another L in the loss column. Kirk Cousins didn't play well. My risk on Van Jefferson that you were trying to warn me against doing that did me in as well.
Ricky Seals-Jones, though, he put up a solid number. Darren Waller, not so much, but Ricky Seals-Jones, definitely.
Yeah, Waller didn't have a great game. I mean, Derek Carr just wasn't that accurate. So it kind of flew in the face of my theory that, well, if Carr has a bad game, at least Waller will get his. But yeah, that didn't work out this week. So I'll be back at it again, like my Lions, clawing back in the game, trying to get a win. So we'll see if I can right the ship. I'm 0-2. So Justin's got a little bit of a comfortable lead on me right now.
I was telling Evan before the episode started, it almost feels like if it's that close, you should almost declare it as a tie. But I guess when it comes down to if it's FanDuel and you're playing for money, there's no ties. There's a winner and a loser. But if it happens again this season and I win by less than 1/10 of a point, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna call that one a tie. But
all right,
for this week, since we didn't set it down, I'll take the W. But if that happens again, I know you're going through enough as a Lions fan. I'm going to give you the tie next time. I've never seen something that close.
So we're drawing a line in the sand that you have to win by a full point.
Yeah, let's do a full point then.
Okay. All right.
It's PPR too, so you just got to get, it's got to be more than a reception.
Yeah. Okay.
And you know what? If you beat me by 0.1 or something is fine then, because I got my little grace period.
No, it's all good. You earned it fair and square. A win's a win.
Yep. Thank you, Trevor Lawrence. He came up big. But I was just pulling up Taylor Heineke's back on the Heineke stats. You compared him to Jalen Hurts. I thought that was pretty interesting. You think he's going to pick up some points on the ground? Is that what you're saying? The last 2 weeks, actually, he's had 5 attempts each of those last 2 weeks, and he's had at least 40 rushing yards each of those last 2 weeks. So while I wouldn't compare a guy like Taylor Heineke to a guy like Jalen Hurts, you do bring up a legitimate point. Outside his past week against the Saints, who have one of the better defenses, he's had 21, 23, and 28 points. So I got to give it to Heineke. He has been balling out except for this past week. All right, let's move on
Yeah.
to a different position now. Let's go with running backs. You got a mover or a loser from the running back position?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Alvin Kamara. He's a guy we just discussed in length. So, but another guy I've been impressed with is Kareem Hunt. He's currently the number 6 overall running back.
Wow.
Yeah, 12 carries for 61 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he also had 5 receptions for 28 yards. So he's a guy that has just been a fantasy stud this season. It was interesting because him and Chubb were basically had identical numbers this week. I think they were about a point apart, but he's a guy that I think we've talked about. He doesn't really get respect in his average draft position, but he's a guy that is so talented. He's still very young. I think he's only 26 years old. He might even be younger. He might be 25, but he's a guy that just continues to produce, and they really go with the hot hand there in Cleveland. So it's been frustrating for Nick Chubb managers, but Kareem Hunt has been a very valuable asset. If you were able to draft him, he was a guy that you could have drafted, not too early in the draft, but he's really rewarding you for your faith and giving you a lot more numbers than you would have expected from a guy at his position. So he's been very consistent week to week, and he's a guy that I'm starting every week at this point if I have him on my team.
He's RB6, and that should come to you as a surprise, even if you had high expectations. But
yeah.
if you've done your research, it shouldn't necessarily come to you as a shock, like a complete shock, because last season I think he finished as a top 10 to 15 running back. So he's still arguably in the RB1 range. So this is a guy that he's been going way underrated despite what he did in his Kansas City days. And a lot of people haven't been realizing it because Nick Chubb's there. But as we said it on the last podcast episode, we both tend to be more like going with the receiving type running backs because we feel like there's a little bit more consistency and they can do it week to week. Where a guy like Nick Chubb, he can have these big weeks, but if he's not being super productive, he's not getting a touchdown, maybe not. And I know Chuba Hubbard a week ago, I had high expectations for him, and he kind of fell flat because this week he did better, but that week I don't think he had a single target. And although he had like 90 rushing yards, it's only going to amount to 9 points. And if you get even, let's say, 4 receptions for 40 yards, that's 8 points right there. So Cordell Patterson's, that's one of those guys that really came through for me in the FanDuel this week. I would say he's still got to be considered a mover. Everyone, if you weren't on the bandwagon at this point, and I know his projection was kind of low, I was surprised, especially seeing how cheap he was in FanDuel. He's going to be a lot higher now. We've seen it now consecutive weeks, basically every week of the season. When the Falcons need to make a play, they either went to Kyle Pitts, who he's a mover. We can talk about him in a minute, or B, they went to Cordell Patterson without Calvin Ridley, and they had no shortage of offense in that game. They relied on those two guys, and those guys came through for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible, but Cordero Patterson's the 3rd running back overall right now. But like you said, he's just been so consistent. They're using him a lot in the passing game and also the running game. He had a season high 59% of the snaps this week, which, I mean, that's still not necessarily, breathtaking, but that's still good. And he had 14 rushing attempts, which was a season high, 54 yards. And then he had 9 targets and 7 receptions. So, I mean, this guy, he's someone that you can plug in your lineup week to week and feel confident at this point. He's a guy that if I'm looking to score a young prospect or some picks and build up my team next season, he's a guy that I'm looking to move for, a good return. But if I'm looking to win a championship this year, he's somebody that could definitely be a weak flex that could really, help me make a postseason run.
I never thought we'd have this discussion before, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to head into it. Jonathan Taylor had a big time week, 32 points, but even still, and he's a mover for sure, even still, he had 2 touchdowns this past week. And outside of the touchdowns, he had 15 rushes for 53 yards and 3 receptions for 116 receiving yards. He had that really big week. So even without it, he would have had a great week. But do you want, if let's say, I mean, this week, Jonathan Taylor is going against the Texans. But is there a case to be made that you'd rather start Cordell Patterson over a guy like Jonathan Taylor, even though he had this amazing week, just solely because of the fact that Patterson's going to have a bigger impact in that receiving game, and he's going to be getting more receptions? I think he had like 5 or 6 as opposed to Taylor's 3 this past week.
Yeah, so I personally would start Patterson over Taylor if they were both playing this week. And that's because out of that 116 yards receiving, Jonathan Taylor got 76 of that on one play and a touchdown. So you take that away, he's got 40 yards receiving, 50 yards rushing.
Yeah.
And another classic mediocre performance for a guy that you drafted as a top, 8 running back. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, he's the problem is he just doesn't get enough targets in the passing game to really be a weekly, productive player. So, I mean, he's a good player. I really like his game. He's a beast, but they like to use Nyheim Hines. Even Marlon Mack was stealing carries to this week. So, I mean, Jonathan Taylor, if he doesn't get the touchdowns, he's not going to have a great week. He's similar to Nick Chubb in that way. There are 2 guys that are very dependent on red zone carries. They're not going to get a ton of passes usually. Derrick Henry was a guy that used to be that way, but he's been receiving a lot more passes this season than on average. And he's also, continuing. He makes up the whole offense. So yeah.
He's Taylor, a one of a kind.
Yeah, one of a kind. He's a unicorn. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't feel great about it, but if Patterson and Taylor were both playing this week, I would feel a little more comfortable with Patterson just because I know he's going to get his targets in the passing game. He gets over like eight targets a week in the passing game, and he's also getting the rushes, and he's being used in the red zone. So yeah, I don't think that there's going to be a week where Taylor outscores Patterson very often.
Okay. He outscored him this past week, but I see where he's saying. I actually expected you to go with Taylor. Now, Patterson is on a bye this week, but point can still be made like in the future. Who are you going with week to week? I don't know. It might be Cordell Patterson at this point. I would definitely give him the slight nod, even though the draft capital for Taylor was first round every way you go, and Taylor's still having a great season for himself. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough, but maybe if the Colts start pulling away, they start getting some victories because it hasn't really exactly happened. Maybe the Colts will make Taylor even more of a part of that offense than he has, just because of the game script and the way that things have been going. But I do want to talk about one more running back before we move on to next position, wide receiver, tight end, and it's Najee Harris. And this guy for me has to be a mover. And week after week, he's getting better. I would say this about Derrick Henry, similar to how he gets better touch after touch in game. Najee Harris has gotten better. It almost seems like game after game with each stride. Although his best week came in week 15, he's in week 3 against the Bengals for 15th, allowed the 15th fewest points. He has had some tough matchups after that, but he's still been dominating. He had 5 points the first week, 19, 28, 21, and 22. So pretty much for the most part, like a steady incline for Najee Harris. And he's been getting a lot more efficient in the rushing game as well. 23 rushing attempts, 121 yards, a rushing touchdown. And he only had 2 receptions for 20 yards, but he still got 5 targets. So, man, that is about 25 touches this past game. And then the week before that, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, 14 receptions, 102 receiving yards. So this guy practically is the Steelers' offense, even if we might not want to admit it. And now with Juju Smith-Schuster out for the season, Najee Harris is a guy I expect to continue putting up these numbers. And I'm going to go pretty bold here. I'm going to say that Najee Harris will finish as the RB1 in fantasy football. Let's hope for it. I know Derrick Henry's there, so it might be a little bit dangerous. If
Wow.
Patterson can be the RB3, what's to say that Najee Harris can't be the RB1 at the end of the season? That jalapeno or habanero, Evan?
Yeah, I'd say that's a habanero because I mean, with how King Henry has been playing week to week,
Can't
I
sustain it,
mean,
or
yeah, I think that Henry can sustain it, but I do like Najee Harris a lot. I'm gonna say that Henry finishes as the running back one, but I mean, I think Harris is the next in line to take his crown of fantasy because I mean, just look at his games. Like you said, his attempts have been increasing. His efficiency has increased. He rushed for 122 yards and 5.3 yards a carry. He's getting touchdowns. He's getting targets in the passing game. And really, with Ben Roethlisberger's lack of efficiency passing down the field, his lack of mobility in the pocket, he's having to throw the ball very quickly. And with Juju Smith-Schuster being out for the rest of the season, the targets for Harris is only going to go up. So I could definitely see him finishing. I mean, he's pretty much a lock if he keeps this up to be a top 3 running back. I could see him making a bid for number 1 overall for sure, which would be incredible. I'm not sure how many rookie running backs have ever finished as a number 1 fantasy running back, but yeah,
has it ever happened? I don't know.
yeah,
That'd be interesting to
yeah, I
research.
don't know. But yeah, so yeah, he's looked very impressive, and it's bad news. I have Juju Smith-Schuster in a few of my leagues.
Oh
He's a
man,
guy that he's a guy that I really liked. He's only 24 years old, and he's very good at getting open, and he's a guy that Ben Roethlisberger has really trusted over the years. He's a very reliable PPR guy, So it was a bummer that he's out for the rest of the season, but that's going to be very good for Najee Harris and Deontay Johnson. Also, Chase Claypool had a really nice week with Ben finally hitting him on some longer passes.
yeah, maybe that arm isn't as noodleish as we thought. I got to give Big Ben credit. I mean, the career he's had, a lot of people are gonna be quick to say, "Ah, he's out of it," but it is the offensive line in a way, and it is just aging. You're not going to be able to sustain that level of strength, and going putting your body through that every day, basically, for how many years he's been in, maybe like 18 almost. It seems like at this point, it's destined to get a lot harder at the quarterback position unless you're Tom Brady, of course, and you can sustain yourself and get better year after year magically. It's going to be hard. So it was nice to see Claypool get that big week. I don't know what his role is going to be, like if he's going to be able to do that each week, just the way that Roethlisberger's been throwing it. But I think without Juju, maybe he'll have that opportunity. Juju Smith-Schuster, he's on a 1-year, $8 million contract, I believe. I think he's going to stick with the Steelers, but I'm not sure. What if Ben Roethlisberger retires? Do you think there's a chance that he goes to another team?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of why he signed that 1-year deal was to give himself some flexibility. So I don't know if the Steelers are going to want to pay him to bring him back when they have Najee Harris, they have Chase Claypool, they have Deontay Johnson, and they still have James Washington, Ray
That's true.
McLeod. So I don't know if they even need Smith Schuster, and there might be a better opportunity for Schuster to go to another team and be a number 1 receiver. So personally, as someone who owns Juju in a couple of dynasty leagues, I would like to see him leave the Steelers and become a number 1 receiver somewhere else. I mean, like I said, he's 24 years old. So, I mean, at 25, he's got a chance to have a really good second half to his career if he can get into a good situation. So we'll see what happens with him there. Another guy that had a great week was Cortland Sutton for the Denver Broncos.
Okay.
So he had that huge 26-point week 2 weeks ago, and then he kind of came back down to earth. But this
Big
week
second half.
yeah, he had 7 receptions for 120 yards, 25 points, and a touchdown. So he's a guy that has looked really good the last few weeks. He's still pretty young. It appears that injury that he had hasn't been keeping him from being productive this season. So him and Debo Samuel were 2 guys that have been plagued by injuries in their career, and both of them have just come out and been fantastic this season. I know Debo's obviously a top 5 receiver this season. He's been fantastic, but Sutton's also looked really good. And with Jerry Jeudy out and KJ Hamler, he's somebody that I could see continuing to get more and more involved in the offense. Noah Fant was ineffective this week, which was a little surprising for him. But I mean, Sutton, he's 26 years old. He's had some injury issues. So he's a guy that you kind of want to decide, am I buying him or am I selling him? Because is he somebody that's going to continue to have those injury issues, inconsistency? Like he's had 25 points, he's had 26, or I'm sorry, 24. And then he's had other weeks where he scored 2, 8, 7, where he just disappears. So, I mean, yeah, the potential's there. He's got the athletic ability, but I don't know if I've made up my mind on him yet. I like his athletic ability, but as far as consistency with the quarterbacks in Denver, I'd probably still have to go with Jeudy if I was going to invest in somebody there, because I think Jeudy just has better route running ability and I think he has better speed. And so he's probably somebody that I would take more of a risk on than Cortland Sutton. And I just don't trust the quarterbacks there.
All right, let me throw this at you then, because it's hard to compare Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, because obviously you're gonna go with Jerry Jeudy. Right?
Yeah.
So are you saying just for the season or Dynasty as a whole?
Dynasty.
Okay, so that's where I was headed. Then I was assuming you meant that. So in Dynasty, you're gonna have to pay probably 2 firsts, maybe like a first and a second. I would honestly think 2 firsts at this point for a guy like Jerry Jeudy. And if you wanted Cortland Sutton, it's not even gonna cost you a first. So maybe 3 times more as pricey is Jerry Jeudy as opposed to Cortland Sutton. And Cortland Sutton, right now, he's putting up some pretty legit numbers, and he has a chance to do that for at least a couple more years if he can stay healthy. So with that cost in mind, are you leaning towards Cortland Sutton as a guy to buy as opposed to Jeudy?
Yeah. If I could steal Jerry Jeudy away from somebody for a first round pick, and I mean,
it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard,
but if I could steal him away, because he is on the IR. So, I mean, if I could steal him away, maybe I give up Sterling Shepard. I throw in somebody with some potential in there. But yeah, that's a tough decision. But as far as value goes, if I could get Cortland Sutton for a second round pick, I would do that in an instant.
I would too.
Yeah, he's a big play threat. He's a big, strong receiver, and he's somebody that I could put in my lineup, and at least he's not gonna completely dud. Like, as long as Jerry Jeudy's not back, he's still the number 1 target there with Noah Fant. So I would trade a second round pick for him now and kind of rely on him as a flex. So I might actually be making some offers after we finish the episode.
Yeah. I do have Cortland Sutton in our listener league, so I'm a little bit biased towards Cortland Sutton, whereas they don't have any shares of Jared Jeudy. I love the dude, but he's just so expensive, I feel like. But yeah, we're talking like 2 years ago before Cortland Sutton got his injury. These owners were wanting similar stuff to what they're wanting for Jeudy now. And look, 2 years later, I mean, not a lot has necessarily changed. And Cortland Sutton still seems like he's putting up similar production as he had that one big year, but he's 2 years older, and now the price has significantly gone down for Cortland Sutton. It's just all about finding those discrepancies, guys that were once high, now low. Hey, Deebo Samuel, that's another name. Deebo Samuel, you said he's like top 5 receiver. I've been all in on him this season, the last couple of weeks especially. Before his injury last season, where he kind of didn't do as much after the injury, after that Super Bowl, you could give a first for Deebo Samuel. They were saying, no way. And like after that injury, like before this season, I think they would have accepted a first. He said, hey, I'll give you a first for Deebo Samuel. They're like, sure, done. But it's just like, even an injury, it's like the price significantly goes down. Just like some dynasty insight for you guys. But anyways, there is let's go with the tight end position next, just because we spent a lot of time on some other stuff. You did mention Kadarius Toney. He's another winner, mover as well, and then Marquise Brown. But we've kind of hit that again with the wide receiver position. And then maybe in the next one we could talk about some losers at the wide receiver position. But I really want to spend some time on the tight end position because man, oh man, the landscape of this position changes week in and week out. So I'll let you get started. Who are some movers or some losers at the tight end position?
Yeah, one of my losers is TJ Hawkinson right now. He's still the sixth tight end overall, and that's based off his first 2 weeks. He had 21 points, 16 points. And then the last 3 weeks, he hasn't scored double digits. So I mean, it's been feast or famine for him. And he's a guy that I think a lot of people were expecting to finish top 4. I know you said that he would compete for the number 1 overall tight end position.
Yeah, I'm looking back.
It's not over, but he's a guy that he just hasn't been getting the targets. What I was concerned about after the Baltimore game, the first 2 weeks against San Francisco and Green Bay, he had, 11 targets, 9 targets. He had 8 receptions both weeks. And then against Baltimore, it dipped all the way down to 2 targets and 2 receptions. And something that concerned me was, have these defenses figured out how to stop TJ Hawkinson? And I've got to say, after 3 straight weeks of dud performances that they have, I mean, they've got to be doing something right now to really box him in, because he just hasn't been effective. And so with Jared Goff at quarterback, there's no wide receivers really over the top, stretching that defense, requiring the safeties to come over and help. I mean, with Khalif Raymond and Daryl Hodge, Cephas is out. I mean, there's just not very many weapons outside of Swift and Hawkinson that the defense has to worry about. And I think that's really causing him to struggle. And so he's a guy that I'm going to buy in on right now, because I think his stock has dropped a little bit. And he's a guy that I'm expecting to bounce back. I think that Anthony Lynn's going to find a way to get him more involved again. The wide receiver core is only going to improve. TJ is only 24 years old. So I expect him, based on what we've seen and his athletic ability and his talent and ability to catch the ball and how reliable he is, that he's going to bounce back from this. But he's somebody that I would be making a move on, right? If I can get him for a first round pick and somebody like Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, somebody else along those lines, I'm going to try and make that move for Hawkinson, because he's going to bounce back.
I do think he'll bounce back for sure. It is interesting though. The last couple of years, I feel like he has this big week 1 game. He has like a few big games, and then he kind of dies off. And it feels like the same thing this season. So for whatever reason, I don't know, but we spend a good bit of time on Hawkinson, so I'm going to move into some of these other guys. At this point, it almost like the way that the tight end position has been this season, it almost makes me want to put my hands up in the air and just say, what is going on? Because now all of a sudden, Travis Kelce's the number 1 tight end with 90 points over the season, but the number 2 tight end, now only 5 points behind Kelce. It's this close right now, this close. It's between Andrews and Kelce. Andrews has 85 points, and he put up, one of the best tight end performances I've ever seen. 41 points this past week, 42 points. And this is a guy before this week we were saying, he's all right. But like after this game, everyone's like, he's an elite tight end. So it changes so much week to week. And now everyone's calling Knox an elite tight end because he's a guy that almost no one had on their radar, and he has 2 big weeks. Has the exact same point total back-to-back weeks, 20.7, 20.7. Hasn't had fewer than 8 points this entire season. He's one of those players where he's now gained the respect of a lot of people. Same as Dalton Schultz. And then Kyle Pitts had his big game. But like last week I was saying, it was a lot of not as expected guys had big weeks. This week it almost feels like it's changed as well. And I'll read off to you the top 5 or so tight ends. from this past week. Number 1, Mark Andrews. Number 2, David Njoku with 28 points. Where did that come from? I know they got 42 to 47, but 7 receptions, 149 receiving yards, and a tight end and a touchdown. David Njoku, that's crazy. I would have never expected a performance like that from Njoku. That might be the highest receiving yard total from a tight end all season, 149. Holy. And then Kyle Pitts, then Dawson Knox, and then Hunter Henry. Those are the top 5. And then after that, it was actually Travis Kelce. And then a week ago, it was CJ Uzomah, Dawson Knox. He stays consistent. But then Mo Alley-Cox, Jared Cook, Dalton Schultz, and Max Williams. So it changes so much week to week. I'm having a hard time. It's hard for me to want to necessarily pay up for a tight end if I don't know if they're going to be able to consistently do it. What's your takeaway from hearing all this?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it kind of goes back to the positions that you draft early and that you can stream a tight end. Some of these guys for waiver wire pickups,
Yeah.
Dawson Knox, they weren't even sure in the preseason if he was going to be the starting tight end. They had Jacob Hollister there as well, and the two were duking it out for the number 1 spot. They ended up going with Dawson Knox, and then that's really paid off. But Dalton Schultz, a guy that's splitting time with Blake Jarwin, and to me, it just kind of shows you that you can stream the tight end position and still be successful, even if you don't have Kelce or Waller or Andrews or Hawkinson. And Andrews is a guy that, before this week, he hadn't even sniffed the top 5 tight ends this season. I mean, he hasn't done anything. And then he just blew up this week. So that was a great performance by him. But I expect him to continue that somewhat, but he's a guy that, you want to see some consistency with. So, I mean, it shows the value of having someone like Travis Kelce, who's going to consistently fill into that top 5 position. But it's just a very sporadic, position in fantasy. And, but we're trying to find, Dawson Knox looks like he's been consistent. Dalton Schultz has been consistent this year. Darren Waller and Kelce are always going to be consistent. So who are the guys that are going to be able to not lose you a week, each week, or possibly win you a week, based on their, the quarterback they're paired with, how many targets they're getting, and the end zone opportunities they're getting as well.
I want to say something about the tight end position as a whole. Travis Kelce, I feel like he's kind of fallen off a little bit. Like only 5 points between him and the next highest tight end. When he has 90 through 5 weeks. So actually that's decent. But I think he had a rough week this past week, 6 points. But prior to this, like this year, I don't remember the tight end position being so highly touted as far as drafting in fantasy. Like if you're in a redraft league, you have to get Travis Kelce like midway through the first round. That's almost where it seems like he's going. Because I wanted him in the first round. I actually did, because that inconsistency, and I wasn't able to get him with like the 12th pick. He went like a couple picks up before me. And then Darren Waller, another guy. Those guys had an amazing year. They broke the record, all sorts of records, like receiving yards in a season for tight end. Now all of a sudden there isn't as much consistency, and we're going back to our old ways. We're like, yeah, this is a position we need to stream. And so even though the excitement was there, it shows you that outside of like these 2 guys, when they're really cooking, this is a position where you don't know what to expect. But I think that's going to be a good point to kind of wrap this podcast up. Evan, do you have any closing remarks before we wrap it up?
Yeah, so good luck to you guys this week. We're going to get another podcast out to you before you set your lineups for these Sunday and Monday games. Mm-hmm. We have a Thursday night game coming up against the Buccaneers, and I don't
Eagles.
know. Eagles.
Fly,
okay.
Eagles, fly.
So for that game, obviously Tom Brady is this must start. Antonio Brown start. Mike Evans start. I would start all 3 receivers.
Chris Godwin?
Yeah, I would. Against the Eagles defense. Yeah, okay. He's been involved enough in the passing game, and they're not really using Ronald Jones at all. So yeah, I would start Leonard Fournette. He's getting the red zone opportunities as well. On the Eagles side, you're starting Jalen Hurts, starting Devontae Smith, and I wouldn't touch Gainwell or Sanders. They both had lousy weeks. Sanders isn't really getting enough opportunities, and then Gainwell, he's a he's a risky flex because they're gonna have to pass the ball so
True.
much against this Buccaneers defense. So if you have to start him, play him as your running back this week. And let's see, Ertz and Goddard.
Goddard's injured now, so
Oh, is he?
an
Oh,
opportunity now for Ertz. He's going to be out at least a couple weeks.
well, that's good news for my fantasy team because I'm starting Ertz. So
All right.
Ertz is a start as well.
I say the Buccaneers win by, honestly, a touchdown, because I know they've been really good this season, but I feel like
Yeah.
those Eagles, they're going to be fired up. They want to show that Super Bowl is not a fluke, that they can compete with the best in the world. This is their mindset. So I think it might be a closer game than we expect. I'm going to go ahead and say tough one. I think it's going to be high scoring, 34 to maybe like 27. It's going to be a high scoring.
I'm going to go.
Come prepared.
I agree with you. I think this is going to be a high scoring game. Jalen Hurts, he can run the ball and throw. So I expect him to do both those things against this defense. Brady's going to be gunning the ball out to his great wide receivers. So I'm going to say the Patriots. See, look at me. I'm still thinking of Tom Brady as a Patriot. I'm going to say the Bucs win 37 to 27. So 10
Okay.
points. Yep.
Okay. So 37, 27, 34, 27. Close predictions. We're on the same page. All right. So I think we're gonna have another podcast later this week for you guys. There's a chance that Kyle might be able to join us for that one as well. So we could have the first 3 host podcasts in a long time. That'll be exciting. So stay tuned, everyone. Enjoy the Thursday night game. We both think it's going to be a good one between the Buccaneers and Eagles. And so far, the first 5 weeks, it's been an overtime game in every single week. So enjoy, everyone, and we will see you guys on the next one. Moo.